Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we're back on our stuff here with The Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2 by Stephen L. Kent. Wonderful book. You should buy it. We're doing sort of a book club thing here, and we're on chapter 14.
14, the big 1-4, as they say.
That is what they say, yeah.
Everyone says that. So this is called So You Say You Want a Revolution. It's a Beatles reference, but it's also a reference to Nintendo's secret project in 2004, 2005, 2006. That's what we're talking about. That's our timeline we're talking right now. So the first section of this chapter is titled Heavenly Luck, and it focuses on Nintendo, and specifically, it's kind of a summary of how Nintendo became Nintendo. Do you think that's fair? That's a fair assessment,
yeah,
I think.
I think so, yeah.
And we've covered a lot of this stuff, so I'm just going to kind of really quickly break it down if you didn't listen to our old episodes on Nintendo. It starts with Hiroshi Yamauchi taking over Nintendo from Sekihiro Yamauchi, and then Hiroshi Yamauchi then went to make different things, because originally Nintendo was a Hanafuda playing card company. It's a playing card game. And Hiroshi Yamauchi decided to do other things when he took over. They had Lego blocks for a while, toys. They had a love hotel where you'd rent a hotel hourly.
You know, some people only need a few hours of sleep. It's silly to pay for a whole night if you need only a few hours.
If you're just going to go take a nap, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And then other business ventures before Hiroshi Yamauchi hired Gunpei Yokoi, who started the first ever Nintendo R&D team, R&D1. And then Yokoi actually mentored and found Masayuki Imura, who would lead R&D Team 2, and that team would make the Famicom, the Nintendo, the NES that we all know and love.
Neat.
Then Genyo Takeda would start R&D Team 3, and that would go on to be renamed the Integrated Research and Development Division that would work on the console we're talking about today, the then codenamed Revolution, which, spoilers to real life, turns into the Wii. We all know it's the Wii.
Oh, man. Do you remember that day when they announced that the name of the console was the Wii?
Oh, yeah.
I was in high school, and we made a lot of jokes, and it was a lot of fun.
It really was. It was a great time to be alive. It was wonderful.
Yep.
So the final thing they talk about, well, not the final thing, the second to last thing they talk about in this little summary of how Nintendo became who they were, is Shigeru Miyamoto, friend of the podcast, who Yamauchi actually hired as just an artist because he saw hidden talent in him. He just didn't know where to place Miyamoto yet. And then Miyamoto, as we all know, went on to design the series that would define Nintendo, which is Mario and Zelda. And what I found funny in the book is they talk about how his career now is he is the boss of the bosses that produce games.
The manager, managing the managers.
He's the manager of the managers. Yes. And I just find it so funny because he's kind of it's weird because it's got to be hard to work for him if he's the person that created all this stuff,
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure there.
The artist thing is interesting to me because one of the things they talk about in the book is that Yamauchi was he was not particularly a gamer, or he wasn't particularly good at a lot of things. What he was really good at was seeing the double lives that people did. He found Gunpei Yokoi, right? And that guy was he made toys and stuff. And he was why don't you make us a toy? And so kind of the same thing for Shigeru Miyamoto was this guy seems pretty good. Not really sure how, but if I just give him a title called artist and just let him do whatever he wants, he'll probably do something great. He was totally right.
He really was. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. It's fun. This is a nice little intro. There's more detail in that in here, but as we know, we want you to buy the book and we want you to support, and we're just kind of book clubbing it and talking about it. So the last little Nintendo biography thing we get to, though, is Yamauchi's successor. And Satoru Iwata is the one who Yamauchi has succeeded him in Nintendo. And it's kind of weird because Yamauchi's kind of known as a tyrannical businessman, while Satoru Iwata is known as a soft-spoken gamer nerd, is how I would describe it. Tyler just mentioned that Yamauchi doesn't really play games, is not a gamer. But Satoru Iwata is a gamer and also a programmer, so he can kind of see what's going to be good and what's going to be bad. And that is what takes us into 2004, when Iwata invites an unnamed journalist to the Nintendo headquarters in Japan, and once there, Iwata gifts the journalist a very rare, limited edition Famicom 20th Anniversary Edition Game Boy Advance SP. This thing's gold. There's only 1,000 of these that were made, and they were put in normal boxes, so it was like a golden ticket situation.
You could just get one if you like went to the store and bought a Game Boy SP. You could have just gotten one of these cool golden ones.
That's what it said in the book. Yeah,
Whoa.
Isn't that weird? It's a very golden ticket thing going on right now. All your grandparents sleeping in one bed playing Game Boy Advance SPs. It's crazy. Okay. So Iwata then invited Shigeru Miyamoto to come into the office and to sign it. I'm like, oh my gosh, who's this journalist? Because they're having the best day of their life. And they didn't even realize it, right? But that was kind of all part of the plan. What Iwata's really doing here is kind of easing into the idea of this is what Nintendo's future is. Like, and that future is we're not going to compete with Sony or Microsoft for most polygons or teraflops or whatever you want to compete over. They wanted to entertain people in a different way. That was their
infinite
quote.
bits.
Infinite bits. So that new way, they actually inspired by an old design philosophy of Gunpei Yokoi, who had since passed away. He died in a car accident in 1997. I think we covered that in a previous episode. But Gunpei Yokoi had this whole mantra, I guess, motto that was lateral thinking with withered technology. So to describe that is they used cheap older tech in a new way. And this is what created the Game Boy, you know, because the Game Boy was kind of old tech for 1989, but it was also super cheap to make and the battery lasted forever. And that's what really made the Game Boy so great.
Yep. And as we all know, if you got games, that's all that matters. You don't need to have tech. You got games.
You got games. And that was also what created the Virtual Boy, which we all know didn't really do very well.
Because it didn't have games.
But it was a virtual reality machine in the early 90s that only cost $179 for the consumer, which is pretty
good.
Pretty good when you think about it. So that's essentially also finally what made Nintendo profitable, too. Because we all talk about how Microsoft and Sony have lost money on their consoles. Nintendo's pretty much always been profitable with everything they've done. Like their consoles, have they ever lost money on a console?
I don't think so. I think they've had times where they didn't make as much money, but I don't think they've ever lost money.
Yeah, because they're not doing the whole you buy the razor to sell the blades thing. They're like, no, we sell everything for profit. That's kind of their whole deal. And they could do that because they're using older tech in a new, inspired way. So that thinking was used to create the newest game console, which it's Nintendo presented at E3 in 2005. And there's a little break in the chapter here that I thought was kind of out of nowhere, but I really liked, where they talk about how Shigeru Miyamoto has been loyal to Nintendo for so long that people think he might actually be kind of stuck there. Did you remember this part? Did you read this part? Or like, essentially it's saying that when Shigeru Miyamoto got hired, Yamauchi made all sorts of weird bonuses in his contract where he's not going to make all his money unless he stays with Nintendo until he retires.
Dang.
Like, he can only work for Nintendo. Yeah. And I thought it was kind of a weird aside to just be like, okay, moving on. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? Like,
Shigeru Miyamoto is actually handcuffed to Nintendo forever. He may not be there by choice. Hopefully he is. Hopefully he really enjoys it. It seems like he has a good time.
Yeah, I don't think it's as serious as it sounds, but people are like talking about how, because they say a fact in the book, and I didn't write this fact down, so hopefully I'm not butchering it too much, where if Shigeru Miyamoto made 10 cents on every single Mario game sold, he would have like $30 million.
He'd be fine. Yeah, that's true. We shouldn't feel too bad for him. This guy, he could leave and go wherever he wants because he has plenty of money. He's just not going to get everything that he was promised from Nintendo if he doesn't retire there.
I think that's kind of the thing they were going for. So, I just thought it was an interesting aside because I'm like, is our hero of the podcast trapped? I hope not.
It's just like, they'll take away one of his 5 yachts if he doesn't retire there. Let's feel bad for him. Like, maybe not. But
also, I'm like, I think he does really like where he is based on how he describes it.
I hope so.
He made this whole universe of plumbers and mushrooms and turtles and piranha plants and fireballs. You know, everything. So, E3 2005 is important for Miyamoto because he actually finally gets to speak honestly about the GameCube's shortcomings. So there's a very long quote in the book that I'm not going to read because we'd be here forever. But specifically, Miyamoto talks about how the controller was harder to use for younger players. Like he mentions the shoulder buttons, just like having your hands reach is just harder for like a kid with small hands because they're a kid, you know? So it's like when Iwata announces the controller for the then named Revolution, people get it. They're like, oh, this is like the direction that Nintendo's going in. We'll see what happens. But then what's there left to talk about but the name, Tyler? Just like Tyler mentioned, Nintendo announces the name on April 27th, 2006 with an animated video where the wand controller morphs into the letter I and forms the word Wii. And people don't get it.
Oh, yeah. Me and 4 of my other friends, we're just going to go sit on our couch and play with our Wiis together.
Hey, there's the joke. There it is. There's one of the many. It's
what
great.
joke? I don't know what you're talking about. That's an actual sentence you can say that has no secondary meaning to it.
You're right. It's totally normal. I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't get jokes. How do jokes work? Okay, Nintendo execs even had a secret meeting with some media folks. And the media people got it, but only after it was explained by Iwata. Because the whole premise of the Wii was like togetherness. It was about inclusivity. But people don't really get that just by hearing the name. And so you could see how there'd be like a problem there with translation. But in the end, though, it didn't really matter because the Wii was awesome and still is awesome.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound weird today to say it either. Like
No,
we thought
not at
we'd be
all.
making jokes for the next 20 years about the Wii and like, nope, nobody thinks it's weird past like the 2 months where we all made Wii jokes.
That's right. It was a very short-lived lifespan on the Wii jokes. But what I wanted to talk about next was actually E3 2006, where Reggie Fils-Aimé, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Satoru Iwata all brought one lucky fan on stage to play doubles Wii tennis. Oh, by the way, I think this is actually like pre-E3. This is like one of those events that happens the night before. You know, it's not technically part of the thing. I should mention that as being a part of history. But a part of the then Wii Sports package that people didn't really know was like a package of games yet. They're playing the doubles tennis, you know? So people were like, oh, what's this game? We have no idea. They don't know if it's like going to be a standalone game. And they played 2 matches. And even though the game had simple graphics, you could tell it was just a fun game. And I am so excited they focused on Wii Sports here because this gave me fond memories of being in my dorm. Like we'd have bowling tournaments. Did you ever play Wii Bowling?
Oh, yeah. I won a Wii Bowling tournament at work when I worked at Amazon in like 2012.
Really? Do you have like the wrist flick all figured out?
I did, yeah. I found the picture of it actually yesterday of my final score. I missed 1 pin at the very end, and I got the spare instead of strikes for everything, so I bowled like a 279 or something instead of 300.
But what did you win? Did you win a trophy?
Yeah, I won a very small trophy, and I think that was it. Mostly I was excited to play it because we got to take time away from work to go do it. And, you know, to bowl a full game of Wii Bowling takes, 10 minutes. I don't know. That was time away from work where I didn't have to be talking on the phone to people. So
hey,
I was
that's
really
a
into
win.
it. I was really excited.
That's what we in the business call a W. Okay,
That's right.
You can get away from work. It's a big win right there. So yeah, I remember playing in the dorm. I actually remember playing in the green room, also in the theater department that Tyler and I were both a part of when they had the Wii in the green room. I almost bowled a perfect game by myself in that green room, and no one would have believed me or saw it, because I didn't have a cell phone at the time to take a picture of the screen.
That's how long ago this was. Not everybody had a cell phone with a camera.
Not everyone had a cell phone with a camera. That's right. So Kent makes a point to talk about E3 itself, specifically the lines. Because the lines for games like Sony or Microsoft were always like pretty big, but Nintendo still had a line, okay? Like they would still have a line of people because they had like their diehard fans, right? But the year in 2006 when the Wii came out, the year the Wii was like shown and Wii Sports was shown, the line wait times at the Nintendo booth were like Disneyland. It was long waits. Everyone wanted to play Wii Sports. And this is also, in the book, it's really funny, the first noted case of people throwing the controllers, the Wii remotes, which I think is very important because that was a very niche, wonderful part of YouTube for me, was watching people throw their
breaking their
remotes
TVs
into their TVs. Yeah, that was a big part. That was a big part of my childhood.
That was a big part of YouTube in 2006 because there wasn't much on YouTube then.
Really, it's true. It's true.
Oh, man.
Oh, I was going to think about all the other weird YouTube videos that were like Chad Vader was one of the ones I would watch. The Darth Vader impersonator. Like he'd do parodies of like David at the dentist or David after dentist and stuff like that.
David after dentist is a vintage meme too. Wow. Yeah, I remember when the Wii it wasn't out yet, but they had some displays at different stores, and I remember going to a GameStop in Kennewick. Probably Matt in Japan was there with me, but he wasn't in Japan. He was Matt in Kennewick then. and playing Excite Truck with the Wii remote and just being absolutely blown away by this thing. Like it like broke my brain that you could move the controller and it did something on screen that was just unheard of. Like we just never done that before. And like now it's of course like not weird at all, but back then I lost my mind playing Excite Truck. That game is not good, but it was really fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever played Excite Truck.
It's not worth it. The only reason it was good was the novelty of the motion controls, and there's plenty of ways to do that now.
Yeah, Wii Sports is probably the best way. That's the other thing they talk about in the book too, is how Wii Sports' controls, as far as like being timed with the motions, were so good. And they still are probably. Like just how it's all synced up, because there were other games. They talked about that Red Blade?
Red Steel.
Red Steel. That was a game, and I remember this game being like a demo where you'd have like a gun and a sword, right? It was like a cool, like, oh, you're kind of, it's very, got strong Matrix vibes is what it had. And that game, they say the syncing of the controller with your movements in the game just didn't really work very well. Not as good at Wii Sports anyway.
Yeah, and I think later games perfected the shooter, doing a shooter with a Wii remote. I don't think that was a shortcoming of the hardware at all. I think it was just Red Steel they just didn't get it right there. But like Metroid Prime 3 was pretty good. I think Red Steel 2, it was even like they had kind of fixed their issues with that too.
Yeah, I never played those Red Steel games. I just remember them being a thing. So anyway, Wii Sports is so good that they beat out Madden that year at E3 for the E3 Game Critics Award for Best Sports Game. And I love what Kent says here about this. He says, quote, "Despite having realistic graphics and a superstar mode that allowed players to manage athletes starting their rookie year, Madden NFL came in second to Wii Sports, a game with spindle-shaped avatars that didn't even have arms." End quote. Yeah, I think it's just so great. This was very nostalgic for me, this chapter, because I feel like we're getting to that point now, Tyler, where you and I are going to start feeling more and more nostalgic, because this is when I started remembering like video game marketing stunts and that kind of thing.
This is when I was old enough to like, I could have a job. So if I wanted to get something, I could get it. And so I was paying very close attention to everything happening, and things were becoming more and more internet based too. Like all like gaming magazines kind of by this time were sort of going away, and everything was being online. And so we were all constantly plugged in to the information flow of video games all the time. And we had the time to do it because we were kids. Well, I did anyway. I had the time to do it. I had a little bit of money on my own. And so like, especially summers when I was just working and playing video games, I was like totally plugged into all this stuff. And it was a really fun time for me personally to be a gamer. And it sounds like you too.
Oh yeah, it was great. It's still a fantastic time when you first get your. There's just something about like people always nostalgic about like high school and stuff, but for me, it's not the high school part that's nostalgic. It's the getting a job and getting like my first money that I could spend on my own, and I could buy like I built my PC from Cold Stone Creamery money, when I was like 16, and that is what I remember as being like. All the parts getting there. My friend who knew a lot about it helped me put it together. It was just like a big thing. And so those kind of games, and Skyrim and all that stuff too. But all right, sorry, we don't want to get too nostalgic. I know we go hard on this nostalgia on this podcast, but we got to get to the history too. So here we go. E3 2006 also is finally where Sony and Microsoft really feel it. They start to notice they've spent so much time fighting each other. There's a third contender doing something totally different that they just can't compete with. And this is kind of fun how their reactions are. So Peter Moore with Microsoft essentially says something along the lines of people are going to buy an Xbox and a Wii. And then Phil Harrison's like, oh, I agree with you, Peter Moore. People are going to buy a PS3 and a Wii. Like they're like fighting back and forth about it. But they all know that people are going to get a Nintendo Wii.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing about that is like they're saying this in a way that's like, oh yeah, we're still going to win. But what they're like not acknowledging there is that even if both of them are right, everyone buys a Wii in this scenario, and at best, like they only get half as much, right? So like they're already admitting here, maybe without knowing, that the Wii is totally gonna, in terms of sales figures, is totally gonna win this generation. Like, and it's not even close, right?
Yeah, it's not close at all, and we all know how it turns out with the Wii. Well, maybe some of you don't. Some of you, this is what 2000. Well, that's going to make me feel really old. Never mind. I'm not going to say the age of the person that could be listening to this was born in 2006. I don't want to say that. But yeah, So this is a big time, and we're going to lead right into some more price facts here.
Yeah. So Nintendo certainly had captured the hearts of gamers at E3 in 2006, but Sony sort of captured their wallet. So the 360 was already out by E3 in 2006, so we already knew that. It was the 360 was $299 for the core version without a hard drive. No one bought that. $399 for the version with a hard drive. And Sony this year at E3 is when they're going to announce the price of the PlayStation 3. And they have a history of sort of winning console generations by just announcing the price, right? Remember at E3 1995 when the PlayStation was announced to be just $299 compared to Sega's $399 for the Saturn? Well, Sony was going to announce their price this time, but not in the same way that they did in 1995. So Sony was going to start PlayStation 3s at $499. So right off the bat, even if you buy the weakest PlayStation 3 possible, you're paying $100 more than the best Xbox 360. So that's for a 20 gigabyte non-Wi-Fi version of the PlayStation 3. And then $599 for the 60 gigabyte version that had Wi-Fi and some other stuff too. I think it had like memory card readers or something when people use different memory cards for things. Kent points out that this isn't the most expensive game console ever because the 3DO multiplayer had released in 1993 and launched for $699. And I want to say it's like almost $1,500 in 2020 dollars then. So that's a lot of dollars. So it wasn't the most expensive console ever, but just because there's already precedent for an expensive console doesn't mean that would go over well because we know what happened to the 3DO and at least partially because of the outrageous price is why the 3DO failed, right? It also didn't have games. You got to have games, but it didn't help that it was...
Got to not be too ridiculously expensive. That's the key.
Right. Yeah, you need two things. You got to cost okay and you got to have games. And honestly, I think the games can overpower anything. I think if you got games, no price matters, but you got to have really good games if that's the case. And 3DO didn't have games.
We're talking Jaybird level quality.
That's right. You got to have Jaybird. How many thousands of dollars do people spend on their Apple IIs to play Jaybird? Several
thousands.
Yes, in 1977 money. Because Jaybird was a launch title for the Apple II. I don't think it was. I don't know when Jaybird came out.
Our Jaybird console for codecs though is going to cost $4,000. So
right, and that'll be a steal. Much like Ken Kutaragi said about the PlayStation 3, he said that it was probably too cheap.
That's your professional podcast. You just brought it right back, and I loved it.
So $4,000 for our Jaybird console, probably too cheap. You heard it here first. So Sony had to spin this a little bit, right? Because they were by far the most expensive. So they had to justify this, right? So to Sony, the PlayStation 3 was more than just a game console. It was a Blu-ray player. And honestly, $599 for a Blu-ray player in 2006 was actually not terrible. It wasn't the cheapest Blu-ray player possible, but like if you were already going to spend several $100 on a Blu-ray player, you might as well just get a PlayStation 3. It played CDs. It played Super Audio CDs. Remember those?
I have never heard of this.
Yeah, I don't remember them either. Well, I do. I remember them being a concept. I don't think I've ever listened to one. They were just like better CDs. I don't know. The PlayStation 3 could play them, or at least earlier revisions of the PlayStation 3. They removed that later because nobody bought Super Audio CDs.
If you bought Super Audio CDs and played them, please send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We want to know if you're out there. We're not going to shame you. We just want to know it exists.
Yeah, and I want to know if they really sounded better or not. Because I would love to, I know a lot of people had Dark Side of the Moon on Super Audio CD. That's the only thing I can think of that I would buy. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting.
But the other thing about the PlayStation 3, and I don't know if they talked about this at E3 or not, but you could install Linux on it and it would be a legitimate computer. So at that point, $599, $699 for a home computer, not a terrible deal either. And it was true that you could use it that way, although I don't think anybody bought a PS3 to use as a home computer. If you installed Linux on it, it was bad. It was not a great experience, but you could. And it was supported at least for a few years until they removed that. And I'm still salty about it. I'm mad at Sony still for that.
Yeah, it seems like they just gave up on a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, they did. They threw a lot of things into the PlayStation 3, and then slowly over the years as they revised it, they just kind of threw features out, either because they were security issues like the Linux stuff, which they actually patched out of even old PlayStation 3s. If you updated the firmware, you stopped being able to do Linux on them. And then they removed stuff like PlayStation 2 compatibility, Super Audio CD compatibility, that kind of stuff. I don't think anybody got mad about Super Audio CD compatibility being lost.
There's one person that is furious still about it.
So mad about
Super
Audio
CDs. When
they upgraded to a slim PlayStation 3, their entire Super Audio CD library was rendered unusable. It extremely upset.
Dear Sony, I spent $4,000 on Super Audio CDs. I don't even know if there were that many Super Audio CDs, because I don't know how popular this was.
Yeah, I don't think it was very popular. I think people bought Dark Side of the Moon, and then they listened to it, and they went, yep, sounds like a CD, and that was it, probably.
Sweet. Music. Cool.
Yep. But the PS3 would have a little bit of trouble getting off the ground, unlike both of its predecessors. So the PlayStation 1 showed that a newcomer like Sony could still enter the console race, and the PS2 is still one of the best-selling consoles of all time, even if it was the weakest of its hardware generation. Microsoft's hardware was technically weaker than the PS3's on paper, but it was easier to program for. However, in 2006, and we should probably do a whole episode on this, and we've talked about it before, but there were rumors about the reliability of Microsoft's flagship console. So many of them were being returned. But Microsoft initially wrote it off as just like normal return rates. They're like, nothing's wrong here. Yeah, sometimes consoles are faulty and people return them and we give them a new one. But they were like, but there's nothing like wrong with the Xbox 360 hardware. Certainly nothing that gamers should be worried about. Certainly nothing you should buy a PS3 instead of an Xbox 360 over, obviously.
Totally.
But in August of 2006, so this would be a little bit after E3, so they hadn't quite talked about this. They didn't talk about it at E3. Robbie Bach admitted to Business Insider that there were high failure rates for the Xbox 360, and they weren't sure why it was happening. It was the three red lights issue, which is the red ring of death. I think we talked about it last time, which just indicates general hardware failure. It doesn't give them any information about what's going on inside that specific console. It's just like, well, something broke, and it's just not going to work anymore. So yeah, it's the red ring of death. And by the summer of 2006, this was a known problem. People were talking about it. Microsoft had admitted it, but basically all early Xbox 360s are destined for failure. It wasn't really a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And so, like, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, yeah, my day one Xbox 360 still works great. And like, that's fine. I'm very happy for you. But like, pretty much, if you have an early Xbox 360, it's going to die on you. Dean Takahashi has nailed it down to subpar testing practices, which Microsoft declined to put a little bit of extra money into. They like cut a little bit of corners in the testing process, probably so they could get more consoles out in 2005, and so that they would have enough for the holiday season in 2006. So a lot of these consoles were coming off the assembly lines, passing the tests, but ultimately they were defective. So when you have a disaster like this, so there's two parts to the red ring of death thing. There's the technical side, which is obviously a problem, needs to be fixed. There was clearly a problem, and Microsoft needed to figure out what needed to be done to fix it. And they redesigned the Xbox 360's motherboard into a more reliable version in some of the later revisions. Not the Slim console, which came out in 2010, but like even some of the later revisions of the original console have less issues with this. It's still pretty prevalent. But they would bring that failure rate down a lot. They wouldn't fully solve it until the Slim console came out. I don't really hear about Slim consoles red ringing at this point, I don't think. So there's the technical part, right? You got to figure out what the problem is. You got to figure out how you're going to solve it. And there's like rumors about what the problem is. I don't know if rumors is right, but
we talked about the lead-free solder.
Yeah. That's kind of like sort of what people have sort of agreed that it is, like this lead-free solder caused the problem. So, but they had to figure out how to keep it from happening in the future, and I guess they fixed that. But the second part of this problem is, okay, great, we fixed it on our end. We're not making any more bad consoles. But what do we do for players that have these bad consoles and they're out of warranty or whatever it is? The people who bought faulty systems and now, through no fault of their own, are just out in the cold, right? You and I are both in this group of gamers, right? We both had 360s that red ringed. We both know dozens of people who dealt with the red ring, right? It was a huge PR issue, and it could irreparably harm the Xbox brand. And so Microsoft had to fix this. So what they did basically was, instead of recalling the machines from store shelves, because they would have never been able to get them back in time to be available during holiday 2006, which was a huge holiday because the PS3 and the Wii were coming out. They needed to be on the shelves there. What they decided to do was extend the warranty of all Xbox 360s by 3 years, and basically say, if you get a red ring of death error, we have a whole system in place here for you to send it back to us, and we'll send you a new one. And they lost $1 billion doing this. Like, that's how they made this right. They went to like the CEO and we're like, this is going to cost $1 billion. And Steve Ballmer was like, all right, we're doing it. I think we talked about that last time, but I think I see this as like, yes, the tech issue was like a huge loss for Microsoft, and like it should have never happened in the first place. But I think the way they handled it is the way to handle something like this. And it's basically no questions asked. If you called Microsoft in during that time and were like, yeah, I got 3 red lights on my Xbox, they're just like, send it in, we'll send you a new one. Like this, at that point, they weren't messing around. They lost a lot of money on it, but I got my Xbox back, and it still hasn't red ringed to this day.
Man, my brother's that red ringed. He could have gotten it fixed, but then he got it hard modded instead. And he got his console banned online. So then I'm like, well, you could have sent it in and just had a working Xbox, but I guess not.
Yeah, well, hey, there's more than one way to handle it.
I mean, it doesn't matter anymore at this point. He got an Xbox One. He's fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I got him at gaming PCs now, so he's doing he's living his best life right now.
All right. I love it. Meanwhile, during all of this, PlayStation 3s and Wiis are selling like hotcakes and gangbusters after their launches in holiday. In like November, late November. I think the PS3 launches like 2 weeks before the Wii or something. And basically, if you wanted a console during the holiday season in 2006, it was a bad time. It was pretty rough out there. I got lucky. I got my Wii a couple days after it came out, but I remember the scramble for consoles stretching well into 2007, like even for 360. And even it was easier to get a 360, but like it was hard to get a console back then. Many people actually opted to get 360s instead of going home empty-handed after they couldn't get a PS3, which is part of the reason why Microsoft probably wanted to keep consoles on shelves, even though they knew they had a problem. They were like, we got to sell these consoles, and then we'll just take them back when they break, which is, I guess, the right way to do it. As long as you're willing to sort of make it right when you know the thing's going to break, I don't think it's the worst thing to sell a console is going to break, as long as I don't know. I guess maybe it's a bad thing, but I don't think it's that bad.
I think you're right. I think this is the best they could have done. And they opened up to it. And they're like, we're spending $1 billion. Well, they didn't know they were going to probably spend $1 billion at that point, but they did spend $1 billion fixing everyone's that requested anyway. That's the best way to do it.
They estimated it at $1 billion. I don't know if that's what it ended up costing in the end, but when I forget who it was, they took this issue to Steve Ballmer and they were like, look, we have a problem. And Steve Ballmer's like, well, how much is it going to cost to do the right thing? And he's like, it's going to cost us $1 billion. And he was like, okay, guess we're doing it.
Yep, we're doing it.
And that's one of the things about being Microsoft is like $1 billion is a lot of money, but to a company like Microsoft, it's not no money, but it's doable. Like they can lose $1 billion if they know that on the other side, there's more than $1 billion coming in. And
it's going to save their brand too.
Right. Like, it was going to save, like if they didn't do it, Xbox was done. Like it was when you talk to Steve Ballmer about that, you're like, this is going to cost $1 billion for us to save the brand or else we're done with Xboxes. Then the decision becomes a little bit easier. And good on Steve Ballmer for having that foresight of being like, no, the Xbox brand is worth more than $1 billion. We should pay this.
Yeah, and he was the one that was anti-Xbox when it was being pitched.
Yeah.
Too. So that's good that he had the turnaround there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve Ballmer, I guess. You know?
So this holiday season of 2006 was a little bit different than in the past because gaming was now becoming more mainstream with this generation. Like this was a big, huge event of like a new generation of gaming, but it was more mainstream. And so with that comes a lot of people who are buying consoles, not because they want to play them, but because they want to sell them later for more money because they know that they're in short supply and that they can jack up the price. Scalpers, basically, which is kind of what still happens today. The PS5, if you want to just buy one on eBay, it's more than if you found it at a store. Same for an Xbox Series X or graphics cards. Oh my gosh, graphics cards! I really want to get it.
I've given up on like getting a next gen system. I just want to upgrade my GPU. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, and that's hard to do too.
I can't do it. Yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah, so there's tons of demand, low supply compared to older consoles, and life is hard for a gamer. In fact, in 2006, Akihabara, which is one of the areas of Tokyo that's like heavily into gaming and technology, it's like everything there. They only received all of the stores received 1,000 PlayStation 3s in time for launch. Total.
Wow,
like,
that's
in this
so
whole
low.
place. And Kent notes in the book that like most stores would have sold 1,000 themselves, like individually, and so there were a lot of stores that got like 100 PS3s to sell when they would have normally sold 1,000 at this time. That's just crazy. So it's tough. But in the US, there were riots at stores that didn't have enough inventory. There's a bunch of stories in the book about people firing BB guns at crowds, a guy who nearly died after refusing to hand over his wallet to some people who were robbing people standing in line. Like, because at this point in time, pre-ordering a console wasn't really a thing. I don't even know if you can still do that, but people would people would stand in line. You weren't buying them online the way you would now. So people would wait outside a store. And you knew all these people had money in their pockets because they were all here to buy a PlayStation 3. And so people would come through and rob them. And one guy got shot when he called the police. And then when they got to him, he was like, no, you can't have my wallet. And then I called the police. And then they ran and shot him while they ran, which is nuts. That guy got his PS3s. And then he put them up on eBay because he was a scalper. And so I think that that's okay, though. If you take a bullet to the chest for a pile of PS3s, I think you're allowed to put them on eBay. I think that one's okay.
That's the only time it's okay.
That's right. I generally don't like scalpers, but you know what? I'll let that one slide.
Yeah. I've always thought, I'm like, okay, yeah, you could make money doing that, but you're just hurting people that really want it, you know? Like, you're not going to go buy... I can't justify buying a bunch of PS3s and then making it so some kid doesn't get one on Christmas.
Yeah.
Just sounds awful. Because his parents have been saving up for the ridiculous price tag. That's not a big deal, you know? They could have gone higher.
Yeah, the one that was too cheap.
Too cheap.
According to Ken Kutaragi. Gosh.
Yeah.
The Wii also had a hard time staying in stock this holiday season as well, although there weren't as many incidents of folks trying to get Wiis, I think because it was a couple weeks later. Some of the initial gaming hype had died down, but also probably just because Nintendo fans are more chill than other fans. That's what I like to believe. There's one radio station that had a contest to see who could drink the most water in a 3-hour period without having to use the bathroom. They called the contest Hold Your Wii for a Wii, which the name of that contest came before they came up with the rest of it. They were like, Hold Your Wii for a Wii. That's the name of it. Okay, what is that? And then that was as far as the thinking went on there. It did not end well. The second place winner died from water intoxication, which is apparently a thing. So don't do that.
It's a thing because we teach that in biology. Not this case, but a kid who drank too much water is a actual lesson in biology. We spend like 2 weeks on it about how water intoxication works. Yeah. Here you go. Working at a school. Yeah, so we were asked to do an episode on like Black Friday shenanigans. I'm using the term very lightly because like people died. And this is the first thing I thought of was this Wii for Wii water thing, because I remember this being national news because one, not a lot of people knew that water intoxication was a thing. And two, the radio station throwing this needs to have more, they're responsible.
They're like, they signed a waiver. We're not responsible. And
well, you made a contest that could poison a person. So yeah, it's not like you holding your hand on a van and you win the van. You know, it's like, this is going to kill you because you're consuming too much of something. So that's I definitely remember this as being a thing.
Yeah, that was a crazy time. It was a very important holiday season, the holiday season of 2006 for that generation of games, because we had the launch of the PS3 and the Wii, and the Xbox 360 had been out for a year, so it was like finally being tested against these newer systems. So Microsoft had that head start, so they'd sold more units by that point. But that head start was a result of cutting some corners in the testing process, and as a result, Red Ring of Death was already a thing by the time the PlayStation 3 and Wii were coming out. The PS3 cost a ton of money, still couldn't stay on store shelves, and Nintendo just kept on being Nintendo, and they just sold every Wii they could make because everybody wanted to play Wii Sports. And both the Microsoft and Sony executives were right in that people would buy one console and then they would also buy a Wii. Everybody bought a Wii. And some people only bought a Wii, and that's okay too. Kent kind of closes the chapter here by comparing the launch to the launch of the Nintendo and the Genesis, the original NES and the Genesis. Nobody cared back then. Like, the Nintendo came out, no one cared. Genesis came out, that was cool. Like, it wasn't a big deal though. Like, it was just a new console or whatever. But now everybody cares. This is the generation when gaming goes mainstream, like big time mainstream. So I'm excited to learn more about this in the coming chapters.
Does this make you feel cool, Tyler, that we were playing games before it was mainstream? Because I got in, early Nintendo, SNES, 64 days. So now we're ahead of the pack, is what I'm trying to say.
If you could have bought stock in gaming as a general thing when I started playing, you'd be very rich right now. Instead, I just have a whole bunch of great gaming memories, which, are priceless, right?
Mm-hmm. You also have a lot of games on your shelf.
That's true. I do have a lot of games on my shelf.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. What you been playing, Mike?
Well, I have not gotten to play as much Witcher 3 as I'd like this week, but I did get to play some of it, which is exciting. I've had kind of a busy week. I've been playing Destiny 2 with you, We're doing those VOG runs, trying to get our Vex Mythoclasts. And that's about it. As far as what I've been playing, it's been kind of a slower week for me because I've had a lot of shows this week, which is not bad, but I just also love video games. What have you been playing, Tyler?
Lots of Destiny with you mostly, and Ruined King. I put in a whole bunch of work on Ruined King this weekend, and been having a lot of fun with it. I think I'm getting close to the end. I'm like 66% of the way through, according to the story completion thing, which I think goes up to 100 when you finish the story. I don't think it's like a indicator of how much of all the things you've done in the game, because I don't plan on 100%ing the game, but I do plan on finishing it. But other than that, that's kind of it. I'm about to go on a James Bond kick, I think, where I play like lots of James Bond 3D games. I'm not interested in older James Bond games, so like GoldenEye and on. So we'll see.
You're not going to do the point and click adventure games with John Glames? You're not going to do those?
No, not with John Glames, no. I've already beaten them several hundred times. I have them memorized now.
That's what I figured, yeah, because we all played John Glames games.
Right.
Obviously. There's only one, but we've all played it.
Yep, a million times.
Well, do you want me to read this email real quick? We got one email.
Sure.
It's from Mike in Philly. Happy New Year. It says, "Hey, Mike and Tyler, Happy New Year. Listening to episode 183 and hearing that Mike has started The Witcher 3 is the best news I've gotten all year. Granted, we're only 3 days in, but it's true. Thank you. I'm super excited about it, and I'm loving it. Season 2 of the Netflix show is way better than the first, in my opinion. Guessing they have a bigger budget. That Jaskier guy is so annoying, though. He nearly ruins the show. I made a meme with his face, but it says Jar Jar Binks. Maybe some of your listeners will get it. I'm sure they will. I've watched it. I enjoyed it also. I think I do like this season more than the first one. Do you watch The Witcher show, Tyler?
I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes of the first season, and I was like, this is cool. But it was a lot like playing The Witcher for me, where I was like, I can see why people like this. I don't think I'm into it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so the email goes on to say, do either of you play any VR games? Will you ever do an episode on the history of VR? I have been playing Resident Evil 4 in VR, and it rules. I know you guys hate scary games, so I won't bore you, but I will say there are certain games that really make a great case for why the future of the VR medium is bright, and Resident Evil 4 is one of them. Also, Blade and Sorcery might be the funniest game to start someone off with who is new to VR. Have you heard of this game, by the way, Tyler?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's so funny. I 100% agree with you, Mike and Philly. Blade and Sorcery. Well, we'll keep going with the email and we'll talk about it. I've belly laughed at violence before. Once you figure out how to spin your weapons in the air like some sort of Mortal Kombat projectile, it really does feel like you've entered the Matrix. I had a lot of fun introducing a few people to VR this New Year's Eve. Again, Happy New Year's, and to Mike, I hope you enjoy Witchin' as much as I did. It's a long, beautiful haul, and I wish I could live in Skellige. I won't bother you about Geralt again. Peace and love, Mike and Philly. I think, okay, wait, no, it's not Skellige, it's Skellige. Skellige? Oh my gosh, he's gonna destroy me for this, because I haven't gotten to that part in the game yet. I know.
I'll Google it.
I've seen this on the map.
How do you pronounce Skellige?
Skellige? I think it might be just be Skellige. Skellige?
Skellige.
Skellige.
Skellige. Skellige.
Skellige. Skellige. So yeah, you know what's funny is, Mike, you are not the first person. Our friend, Aaron, Tyler and his friend, has said Skellige is his favorite place in The Witcher 3, and I'm excited to get there. It's like the third area you go to, because I'm still very much in Velen. So yeah, I'm super excited. But regarding Blade and Sorcery, if you haven't watched videos on Blade and Sorcery, Tyler, on YouTube, highly recommend, because
I'm about to.
It is this ridiculous game where you're like first person sword fighting, but you really can. It's like janky, but in the best way possible is how I would describe it. Like you could do crazy stuff. Like occasionally you'll like decapitate an enemy like soldier and their head will just get stuck on your sword for the next like 4 minutes. And you gotta like try to whip it off. Like it's just, it's really like funny and in a dark, gruesome way. Yeah. And regarding the history of VR, I would love to do that, Mike. I do play VR games with friends when they have like a headset they bring over. Like we've gone camping before and gone to a cabin and they've brought their like Oculus Quest, and I had a really good time with that. I really want to buy one. I just have so many games. I can't justify it right now. You know, when I'm on the hunt for a GPU, I can't justify buying an Oculus Quest 2.
I feel the same way. I really want to get some sort of VR set up, but I think I see the price and I'm like, I could buy something else with that though.
They sell Oculus Quest 2s at Costco for like $300 something.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it's not bad. It's just my whole thing is like, it's just another thing to add into the long list of all this VR stuff. All the other gaming stuff I have, not VR stuff, but I definitely do think I will want one. I have played Beat Saber. I have played a little bit of that Star Wars story game, and I played one called Pistol Whip that's like The Matrix, but with cool music in the background, and I really liked it. So, yeah, I haven't played Blade and Sorcery, though. I've only watched videos on it, but I very much know what it is because it looks so funny. So, cool. If you want to send us an email, you can send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We are also on Discord. If you want to join our Discord, send us an email, send you a link, or you can go to my Twitter at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Click on the pinned tweet. That is a Discord link that never expires. Tyler is also on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. I think that's it for the day, right? Does that sound good to you?
I think that's it. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Do you want to say bye to everybody?
This has been a very efficient episode, I feel like.
It really is. We're really efficient today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, goodbye, everybody.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com